Hi, it's Nikki Doyle from Divination. Happy Monday, happy full moon. So this week I want to talk about divination. I'm passionate about divination. Most people think divination is simply about fortune telling, and in that way they kind of undermine it a little bit. But I don't. I think it's much bigger than that. It's much more important than that, because essentially divination is communing with the divine. Now, every time you talk about kind of divination, the idea of prediction, there brings up the initial debate of fate versus free will. And I've had this debate. I've had debates with psychics and mediums and astrologers and card readers, and no one really has a definitive, because obviously it's their own truth. But even then, we sit and we kind of change, we evolve a little bit in that, because no one seems to have a fix. This is exactly what it is. This is exactly what is free will. This is part of our lives that isn't. It evolves as I think we grow. Now, I think the one thing that I've always had a problem with the Secret was the fact that they turn around and they say, well, actually, you can have everything that you want. Which, especially when you do astrology, you realise that's not true, because your natal chart gives you natal promise. It shows what is, the possibilities within this lifetime. Now, I kind of stand a little bit between the two. I don't believe that we have complete control, but I do believe we have we have control over ourselves. We have control over what we do, and therefore our whole self has control, and therefore you gain a certain amount of control over your environment. You don't have control over other environments and other people unless they give it to you on some level, whether it's conscious, subconscious or unconscious. They have to give you that, which is why I guess that I don't do spells, which I don't think are bad, but I sit very much on you can only push someone to do something if at some point they've accepted it. So that's the one side of it. And then there's the other side of, there are certain things you can't, if you've got cancer, you can't necessarily always cure it. And it doesn't, I don't like the way we talk about cancer, and that we say, oh, you've beaten it, or you're a fighter. But actually, not everybody can, there's this whole idea that you can get over everything. And when you start using fighter, or you've won your battle with cancer, then you'd have to kind of look at the other people that haven't survived. Are you saying that they didn't fight it? They weren't good enough? And so I don't really like that. I think you have to be very careful, especially when you're working in a healing capacity, of how you actually frame those type of interactions. How do you frame it, rather than turning around and saying, okay, if someone comes to you and says, will I survive this? Will I do it? You have to be very careful in the way that you actually express that. I think that's not even if they come to you. Look at the way that we talk about things in general. There is this whole idea that we have so much control about everything, then if you don't do it, then you're a failure. And there's also this old blame and responsibility. So, I think a lot of people have a problem when they're talking about if everything is fate and you have no control, then why do you bother making an effort to do certain things, because it will happen anyway. But then you have the other one when you're talking about fate and free will. When you have complete free will, if something happens to you, then you created that. And I think this is where people get a little bit, it can get into very heated debates, because I think there is a difference between creating that experience before you were incarnated so that you could, or creating that situation so you could experience it before you're incarnated, and that's not on a conscious level when you're actually born. And I think that's because you can't have blame and responsibility, and the soul doesn't really kind of sit with those experiences. It's really just about, I need this experience, and I need to see how I've learned and moved on, and maybe I'll do a video about that another time. So that fate and free will debate is very strong when you're starting to work on prediction. And doing accurate predictions takes a lot of hard work. You have to train a lot to get that consistency, because it's very easy to fall into saying what people want, you know, especially when I get a lot of predictions. I remember having to do a prediction for a friend, funny enough, and she said, so when will I find someone that is significant? And I was like, and I literally got 40 popped into my head, and I said 40, and at the time I think she was only about 35, and so she kind of looked at me, and she was like, so fast forward how many years, I'd forgotten about it, and she says to me, oh, you know you said that I would find that person, but I had to wait till 40, and I remember feeling at the time I really didn't really want that, I didn't want to wait, blah blah blah, but guess what, I found this person, and they're amazing, and they're still with them now. It's very hard when you're telling somebody that years and years in advance. They don't often like it. So often prediction can be a little bit, you can predict it and get the time wrong, sometimes because spirit lie to you, because we sometimes lose interest after a certain period of time, and if they want you to kind of work forward to something, they kind of sometimes fudge the timing, which is why astrology is really a good tool to have, because you can confirm it with astrology, because if you don't have any transits that are significant around that time for what you're looking for, it's unlikely to happen. But prediction as itself is actually an accurate, consistently accurate predictions, something that are really, I think very few people do. You'll see some people online who are doing actually consistent predictions, but personal predictions is really hard to kind of, how do you quantify that as well, because what are your metrics? And I think it's very important that people think about the metrics of whether their predictions were right, or you know, what percentage, because a lot of people, one of my friends said to me the other day, she said, oh yeah, my predictions, I made a 100% accurate prediction. And I said, well, very rarely are predictions 100%. She said, oh yeah, but I got the outcome. I said, yeah, but you didn't get how. So you got that, which the odds of that, it's like a football game. You watch a football game, you make a prediction. Now if you only make a prediction about the end score, you've got a 50% chance of getting that right. This person, well actually no, because you can say one's win, one draws, but you've actually got, they're actually quite low. The odds, well not low, the odds are quite high, because you've only got 3 different options to go for. But if you're actually adding in the minute details of, well, it's going to be by 2 clear goals, or it's going to be 3, 2. These ones are where you bring in the accuracy. But you also have to remember that as soon as you say something that is inaccurate, it takes points off your accuracy score. So really, no one really gets to like 99% accurate or 100, because every word that you say in that prediction would have to come true. So that's why it's very clear. That's why you have to be very clear and concise. And a lot of the time in prediction, people will lose points, in my system anyway. And I did put it in a spreadsheet, because it's the extra things that people add. And when you're doing readings, you don't tend to just say that one thing. You know, someone, oh, when am I going to find this house, or when am I going to find this partner, or when am I going to head up? You can, you can't really just say it's this. And a good one lesson I learned in prediction really early is, and it changed the way I predict. So I was doing quite a lot of free readings at the time, because I was doing a lot of tarot, and I'm like, yes, I'm going to read for everybody, and then I'll think about going professional. So I was reading, and this in this group, and this girl came up, and I gave her a reading, and I gave her a name, and I kind of told her when, and then at the same time there was another reading that I did for somebody, and it was very similar. It was a love reading. It gave predictions, and I was giving details back then. I was really tight details, and one of them, the one that I said, well, actually, yes, you'll find him and this type of information. When I saw her next time, I was like, well, how's it going? And she was like, oh, no, I haven't found them. And what it turns out during the conversation is that after the conversation with me about, finding love, she stopped doing all those things that she was doing to get herself out there and do all of that, because she just thought it was going to turn up. And so she kind of changed her path by actually then just staying in. I was going to turn up on my doorstep, which is usually not very true. The other person, when I'd given a specific name and other details about how they were going to meet, I saw her a few months later, and she was like, yeah, I still haven't. And I was like, I had given her a date and everything. And I was like, okay. So I was kind of trying to mull over, I'm very much reflective, trying to work out why is this not happening? And then what did I do that day? Oh, so I saw her a couple of months later, and then she said, oh, I meant to tell you. And the story basically goes is, she met this guy, she really liked him, and it was around the date, but he did not have the same name that I gave her. So she kind of kept him on the back burner. He was very, very keen, and she really liked him, but she was waiting for this other person. And then at some point they'd gone out with a group of friends, and he was still trying to impress her. And someone had used, because it turned out he wasn't using his first name, he was using his second name. And actually someone's called him by his first name, and she found out that actually that was the person through his name. And what I learned from that was, sometimes you can give people too much kind of information, or the information can be a little bit too restrictive. So you have to be careful the way you deliver it. So it reminded me, so yeah, I gave her a name and I gave all of those. But actually, did the name help her? The description probably helped her, because she was like, oh, he was very much like that, but that's not his name. People can get very attached to that and then focus only on that. And so you have to understand what power that you have and how you deliver it. So would I give a name now? Sometimes I still do, but the name wasn't as important as all the other stuff. She kept him on a back burner because he didn't have that name. So she waited, and she could have possibly just dismissed him because there's somebody without. And the name was so significant to her that someone could have come along who didn't fit that but had that name and had that rough description, and not being able to fit everything. And she might have then kind of discarded this one for this one. So just remember the way you deliver is very important, and also how you receive that. Because it doesn't mean that, that name could be a nickname or that detail. So you just need to make sure that, especially when you're getting a reading, that you aren't cutting your nose off to spite your face. You're not going, okay, well, it's this exact person, and therefore I'm going to wait for just that. You still have to discern that information that came out. And so, yeah, I might talk about some of my other divination disasters especially when I first started. But that was one that made me kind of change the way that I was delivering predictions. So yeah, you can give people names, you can give people lots of those details, but you have to work out what is relevant, and you have to understand how that person works. And you might not understand it, but that's where you have your guides come in and go, what is this? And I change my intention so that it says, when I'm doing it, I change it so I'm focused on what is the best information for them right now. Because at the time I was like, yeah, feeling quite cocky. I got a name, but actually that name didn't help her. And my job is to make sure that they get the answer that they're looking for, and to be accurate in that answer. Now, really, I should have gone and asked how she would have wanted that delivered, and I probably would have been not told that names weren't good, because she gets fixated on that. So yeah, and I will be doing stuff with how to use your guides in divination, how they can support that too. Sorry, it's very rambling videos. It's a full moon. I'm a Cancerian. Yeah, I can't be held responsible for kind of random things happening on a full moon. Anyway, I will speak to you all tomorrow.